As we have no one attending remotely, I will only read out the information for attendees in the chamber. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment when invited by the chair, please press your microphone, which will turn green. The chair will invite you to speak one at a time. Please wait until your microphone has turned red before beginning. Every effort will be made to ensure that the questions and comments are asked in order of a hand being raised. But we ask that you recognise the complexities involved when we are monitoring both online and in-person attendees. If for any reason a member of the committee has cause to leave the meeting, they must indicate this to the chair before leaving. Case law is clear. You are not allowed to vote if you haven't heard the full debate. If your screen freezes but you have heard the whole debate, you may use your discretion as to whether to vote. However, if you did not hear the whole debate, then you cannot vote. Could I please ask all officers and guests who are joining remotely to turn off their cameras so that only councillors, lay members or co-opted members are on screen? You're asked to turn on your camera when presenting reports or responding to questions, but please turn them back off once your item is finished. Could I please ask Democratic Services to begin the recording? Round dda pawb, croeso i'r cyfarfod heddiw. Hello, and welcome to the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council's Neighbourhood Services Countryside and Planning Scrutiny Committee on Monday, the 13th of November 2023. Please note that this meeting may be recorded and broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes. Item 1 is apologies for absence. We have none. And are there any declarations of interest, including whip-in directions? We have none. We move on to item 3 then, the replacement LDP 2016 to 2031 annual monitoring report 2023. And I'll hand you over to Councillor David Hughes, the portfolio lead for service.
Thank you, Chair. As I read the summary of the report, the LDP annual monitoring report is required to be submitted to Welsh Government in October each year. The MAMR assesses the extent to which the adopted local development plan strategy, policies and sites have been delivered and provides monitoring data to inform ongoing policy research. This report provides a summary of the third ARM for the replacement LDP of 2016 to 2031, which was adopted in January 2020 for information purposes. A copy of the AMR is also being published on the Council's website as required by the Welsh Government. Purpose of the report is that the conclusions of the report are noted that any issues be debated. Where we are at the moment, if you look where we are, following the 2015 AMR, the Council prepared a review report that identified key issues in the implementation of the first adopted LDP 2006-2021. In particular, it was identified that there were issues in realising the enhanced growth strategy for the adopted plan in terms of the level of growth. Consequently, the review report recommended a full review of the LDP and that the replacement LDP be prepared and address the issues identified. As you can note, where we are now, the AMR reports progress against the indicators set out in the monitoring framework and the adopted LDP, which tracks the performance of the plan and policies and the allocations. The performance against individual indicators is summarised in Appendix 1 of the AMR. Details analyst is provided in the main body of the report. The 2023 AMR indicates most aspects of the plan and the strategy are working well, and that the policies of the replacement LDP are being implemented effectively. In particular, if you look, the majority of the LDP, that's 88% of the permitted on previous development land. Affordable houses continues to be delivered broadly in accordance with the target included in the monitoring framework, although there remains a high level of need for affordable housing, particularly in relation to single persons accommodation. Policies that seek to protect the environment and historic destinations have been implemented effectively with no development granted contrary to the relevant policies. There are, however, some aspects of the replacement that are not working as well, or being implemented as effectively as they could. These are the overall housing delivery has dropped below the level required at the point in the plan period, with completions over 30% lower than they need to be. And it must be said, while I'm reading this out, this is reflected right throughout the country, not only in Wales, but also in England. Targets not being met in relation to the delivery of the allocated employment land and the number of jobs delivered. A target not being met in relation to improvement for priority open spaces using funding gained through the planning system. The target of each generating renewable energy development across the county borough is not being met. If we then go to the end of the report, because you all read it, where we want to be, a lower level of overall growth proposed in the replacement LDP plan in comparison to previous plan has enabled a greater focus to take place on the quality of new developments, and there will not be as much pressure on development to develop every piece of available land as soon as possible. However, the delivery of the land that is allocated for housing and employment use is critical in the delivery of the strategy of the replacement LDP. I'd leave it open there because I'm sure there's many questions you'd like to ask.
Thank you, David. Before we come to questions, I want to put a little bit in. The title of the report is Replacement LDP 2016 to 31. Annual Monitoring Report, and members of this committee are concerned that whilst the issues regarding housing delivery and allocated employment land are emphasised many times in the report, many other details are not clarified, as will be seen from my colleagues' questions which are to follow. As the full review of the LDP will commence from January 2024, the committee considers this to be a missed opportunity for Scrutiny to have greater input to that review. Items such as existing housing and employment land sites could have been produced on a ward-by-ward basis, including a brief rationale for their inclusion, with alternative council-owned land being identified. For cross-reference, it may also be worthwhile listing sites according to designation, housing, employment land, etc. I believe this would encourage more people to look at the proposals rather than reading the circa 900 pages of information. An example of this, and the reason I mention it, is that I and other members of this committee believe that the eventual site chosen for the Catholic 3 to 16 school should have been the Goatmill Road site, with its location and road infrastructure lending itself to such a development. Whereas the two proposals for the site that have been deemed to be inappropriate due to close proximity to large housing estates. That said, I will, subject to committee agreement, be encouraging all elected members and committee co-optees to thoroughly scrutinise the reviews for the awards and the implications they may have. As far as possible, also to the general public, subject to the Director, Cabinet Member and Comms input. Thank you. I will now open the floor for questions. Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions and they're on different pages. My first two are on page 8 of the report, under 7.3. There's about 5 or 6 dots there. The first dot says the local planning authorities involved in discussions with the council's regeneration department and the landowner of the Hoover factory site to determine the most appropriate way to enable delivery of this strategic housing allocation. Perhaps I'm on the wrong track here, but I was under the impression that the site that we were talking about is on the Abercanid side of 200 properties. But correct me if I'm wrong, are we talking about another area of land? Because planning permission has already been given to that site, if it's the one I'm talking about, and they've got about 2 years in which to get that site ready before they start building.
The site being referred to in the report there is the main Hoover factory site itself. It's allocated within the plan,
Right.
For 400 dwellings.
So are we talking about the cricket field area at the one end?
That's part of the allocation, yeah.
Right. So that's in addition. That's where we get the 440 from. 200 the one side, and there'll be 220 there.
No, the 400 is just in relation to the main factory site, which is what the master plan that was agreed and adopted as part of the plan in 2020 covers. It's from to the east of the railway line, in between the railway and Cardiff Road.
I thought part of that land, or a large chunk of it, was due for the metro station, but that's plans have all disappeared now, have they?
There hasn't formally been any large area of land allocated for specific metro proposals as part of the master plan, and on the LDP proposals map, there are improvements at the station identified on the plan. And again, it sort of links in to sort of the theme of today, really, in terms of it's a reason as to why the full review of the plan now is needed in the new year, because there's discussions in relation to potentially relocating Pentrath Station slightly further to the north to sort of fit in with metro proposals and the redevelopment of the factory site itself.
Further up the line.
From TFW's point of view, in an ideal world, if it can be done in that location, yes.
Right.
There's specific issues in relation to the sort of alignment of the track and replacing the station, because Pentrath Station isn't sort of fit for purpose anymore. To get the best station, you need the sort of platforms to be on an area where the track is straight, and that would be further. We're still within the sort of south of the Brandy Bridge, but within the Hoover site, because the line does straighten a little bit further to the north.
I'm sorry when I hesitate to have a little chuckle there, but if you're moving the station, particularly and only because it's a straight track, you're moving away from the usual population that catch the train there, in my opinion, from Pentrath, Abercanid, and around that area. Anyway, it was, am I right in saying, it was going to be a metro hub there at one stage. That was part and parcel of the plan. That's obviously, those plans have gone.
Yeah, before the plan was adopted, there was sort of some initial plans at a sort of a larger park and ride scheme, but I think through TFW's own work, they didn't feel that was justified in this location.
And we can get 440 units of accommodation on that field without any problem.
Without any problem. It's not just a field. Like I said, it's essentially from the station, Pentrath Station, up to the northern entrance to the main Hoover site. Yeah. So it is the entire factory site, but obviously there are likely to be a number of issues to overcome before you can deliver houses on that site.
Still not a massive area, in my opinion. But anyway, so that begs me the further question, Chair. And I know this was raised, and I raised it as well in full council. Are we taking into account as a planning authority that there is more than sufficient school places for these other extra 440 apart from the 200 they're building across the other side of the river?
Yeah, we consulted with education right the way through preparing the LDP that was up in 2020, and there would be tweaks to catchment areas required, but given the scale of the proposals at the time, they weren't large enough to justify an additional school of its own. The capacity could be met to the existing premises in the locality.
I'll have to check the figures again, but I made inquiries at the time, raising the council meeting about even going up to Cadrow School, whether they had total capacity to take the increased number of properties there. And certainly the one in Trotteroo didn't have it. And obviously that would be the nearest primary school for those people if they move into those 440 properties. Hey, still in the same.
Clive, before you go next, and can Judith come in there, please?
Right, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to offer some comments in relation to the opening statement that the chair made. I just thought for context it might be useful before we go on to any more questions. So yeah, in relation to your comments about, it would have been helpful for the scrutiny committee and members to get involved in the review. By all means, we welcome that. Perhaps the way these things are titled are not self-explanatory, but the review of the LDP will actually take 3.5 years. So there will be ample opportunity for the scrutiny committee to get involved in that review process. And I think Neil and Craig have been having some discussions about, workshops and, in ward by ward sessions where we can, have your input into those. So the second point then you made, using the example of the new BCA school and the site for those. As you'll see, we're going through the next review. What happened last time was not only for education, but in this example, education were given ample opportunity to engage with the process and to submit their preferences for sites. My understanding is that those particular allocations weren't made in this LDP because they didn't feel they were at a stage, they were advanced enough with the proposals for new schools to have certainty that they would be delivered in the timeline of this LDP. But we do always encourage all departments to engage in the LDP. For instance, with regeneration, there was an allocation in there for the new bus station, which thankfully was delivered. But ideally, yes, all schools would be allocated, but it's not always practicable in the time constraints we're under. I just wanted to clarify that so the committee are aware that they will be fully engaged.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. It's good news that we will be fully engaged in it. And my apologies for not giving you the opportunity to respond at the very beginning. Back to you, Clive.
That's all right, fine. Well, that begs a further question that I did have down here. Chair, why is it taking 3.5 years? Because by the time we finish that, we may well be talking about the next 10 years of another new local development plan. It seems in order to length of time to me for 3.5 years, things change a lot in 3.5 years.
Well, there's a significant amount of work to do to compile a local development plan, evidence gathering for all the policies, all the allocations. This particular plan, obviously, it was adopted in 2020. So, there's been that time up until now where we've monitored the plan. We monitor it annually to see if the policies are working, if the allocations are coming forward. And then it's legislative how long it needs to take and what the process is, and each and every stage of the local development plan has to be carried out in line with that.
So the planning staff will be working on this from year on. Well, they probably have, but they'll know from year on in. And then at what stage do we get involved as a SRUT committee and full council for that matter?
So the first stage is, and what we'll be working on from next January, is we write what's called a review report. And again, this is set down in legislation as to one of the parts. So that will take probably the best part of a year to compile that report, which will then be presented to full council. Now, this is what was done 4 or 5 years ago, whenever when we did this plan. So council will have the opportunity then to review it, and there'll be a recommendation. We then set out what's called the delivery agreement, which has to be agreed with Welsh Government for the different stages and how long each of those take. There's things like public consultation, various stages of those, before we come up with things like the vision and objectives for the plan, the deposit plan, which then goes to full council and is reported before then we get to the examination.
Right. So at the end of a year, we're able to get involved as a Scrutiny committee, are we not?
Yeah, you mean there'll be involvement before that as well?
Right. And the point that the chair made in his statement was that after you've done, the staff have done the work there, if there's land in there that's been identified for a school or housing, employment land, where the local ward members, because the chair gave a very good example of where, and I totally agree with him, where a major school development was undoubtedly situated at the wrong place. So that was a really good example as to where the ward members could have said, or other members could have said, this is totally unsuitable. So we will have that opportunity, will we not?
So for the first period, just to be clear, so the review report was the current LDP and the success or otherwise of that. And then we progress then through the various stages of writing the new plan, which is when we'll come to, needs, site allocation, evidence gathering, all those kind of elements.
So whatever's in there could be changed.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just coming quickly here, sorry, it's probably worth just sort of pointing out the term review is how it's prescribed in national guidance, national legislation, but it's probably a little bit misleading, because effectively you have to review 4 years after adoption at the latest. But in 99% of the cases, doing that review will mean that you start work on another plan. So you go back to the start again. And that's when, like I said, there'll be work to write that review report by the end of 2024. And as part of that work, we will do ward by ward consultation with the members to look through what's happened in the individual wards, whether it's done directly through scrutiny or done just by the members ward by ward. But then what will happen then is we will start work on a new plan, late 2024, early 2025, and that's then the 3.5 year period. But the base date of the plan changes, whereas this is now 2016 to 2031. 2016 is when we started work last time, got it adopted in 2020. It'll be 2024 or 2025, depending on when we start, up until 2039, 2040. But and this plan, sorry, the plans in place now will still remain the plan that decisions are made against until that new plan is adopted.
Right. So in the last 2.5 years of the review, as councillors, all 30 of us, cannot change anything that's stipulated in the current local development plan.
That's not as part of that comes when we write the new plan.
Yeah, so you've answered my question. It can't be done. It can only be done when the next local development plan has gone through the process.
Yeah, you can't make changes to the adopted plan.
Right.
Don't make changes when you're writing a new one. If there was reason within the first year or two after adoption to call an early review, then you'd start the review 2 or 3 years earlier. But so we haven't had the review until now. That work will start the next year.
The next question on page 8 is the third dot down. It says the council is looking to use funding available from Development Bank Wales in order to bring forward several sites using a self-build Wales model. Can someone tell me how much money we're talking about? Is this on a loan basis to individuals who want to self-build? I currently live on an estate that there are 115 self-build plots. I don't think, I might be wrong, but I don't think there have been very many since that state that I'm on are all self-build plots. Is this something new? And you referred to I think you accept several sites is the operative word there. So where's the money coming? How much money are we coming from? Is it going to individuals or is it going to the local authority to set up the groundwork for the?
There's two different pots of money available from Development Bank of Wales. There's money available to local authorities and developers which they can use to get sites ready, to sort of put infrastructure in, put a road in, level the sites off, retaining works to get the plots ready to sell. We could recycle that loan to move on to another site. But there'd be a time frame set within that loan that it'd be paid back at year 20. So we could use it to bring forward a number of sites. That same part would be recycled. But there's also the side then in terms of the people looking to build and buy the houses as well. I think they essentially get the plot is subsidised. I can't remember the exact percentage split, and then they get 100% of the actual build cost of the house as grant funding, and then when the house is completed, they have to mortgage, so that grant funding transfers over to the mortgage to the occupiers then.
Right. So, for example, I'll give you an example in my case and everybody else living there. Had to pay eventually to the local authority all the road and drainage charges. You know, the paying for the street lights. But I'm not sure about the street lights. Perhaps that was outside it. But certainly the road and drainage charges. There was a charge on every one of the original builders on my estate. Is that something that the self-builders involved with this wouldn't have to pay for?
It shouldn't be the case in these examples, as we would be like the ones putting that infrastructure in ourselves before. We'd factor that in then when we set the price that we're selling the plots for.
Yeah, but that's very important point in my opinion to people. I mean, it was fair ed when I started building it. 3 years later, my colour of my hair had changed. I could write a book. I wouldn't change different things all over again. Yeah. So, but to end up with a bill of a few £1,000s for the road and drainage charges to people on self-built plots is really important.
It's still a relatively new scheme across Wales. There's not that many sites that have actually come forward, but this is one of the reasons why we sort of starting off with some small, rather than sort of a Lakeside Gardens type size site. I think we're looking at the first site we're looking at is part of the Upper Georgetown Plateau housing allocation. Next door to Cape Enderin. For I think it's 9 plots is like looking to be the first one. We're hoping to be coming in with a planning application for the site infrastructure and the plot layout early in the new year.
Okay, thanks. Right, it's just over the back of page, my fault, page 7 under 5.3, first dot down. It refers there to the overall housing delivery has dropped below level at this point in the plan, with completions over 30% lower than they need to be. I mean, I think the April 23 figure is a good example. What was expected there, 600 odd, and we built, I think, 344. So there's a few hundred difference there. That, in my opinion, I think other members of the committee, there are all sorts of reasons for that. And I think it was referred to by the cabinet member. We're not the only authority with an issue like that, because unfortunately there's several factors. COVID.
There's obviously everything sort of slowed down during the pandemic. We had the sort of the cost of living issues then, and also the cost of materials and the prices of everything going up, which impacts on it as well. In terms of local issues, we've had a number of contractors that were involved with housing association sites that would have delivered units over the last 2 years. They went bankrupt, so those sites have been delayed by 2 or 3 years. But again, it's that whole variety of issues, which is why now we are at the point where we effectively need to go back to the start and say, well, actually, is the strategy, the plan appropriate? Is the level of growth appropriate? So that's what we look to tease out through the work on the review report next year.
But it's not easy, is it, through you, Chair? Because if something has slowed down or virtually come to a dead stop because of several factors all happening one after another at the same time, to restart it, to get at the pace you were there a few years ago, is not an easy matter. I mean, for example, I know the St Tidwell's Hospital site, where there was over 100 properties. Everybody, I remember on the planning committee, we got permission for that. Plans were very good, variety of accommodation there. I think the contractor was one of those who went bust. So in the meantime, for sites as that as an example, what's been done to encourage new contractors to go back to these sites where it's.
Excuse me. But I know the housing associations themselves would they seem to bear the brunt a little bit in terms of the sites that were looking as if they were going to come forward, sort of late 2019, early 2020. But they have now got contractors back. I think it's on the 3 or 4 sites that they were involved with, where developers went back. But again, it is like I said, there's a number of external issues that affect the amount of housing or the amount of development that can be actually delivered in Merthyr, no matter how much land we allocate for it. And it is a balancing act in trying to get that strategy right in terms of the level of growth. Like I said, it might be that we look at it and we determine the level of growth is appropriate and we end up with that same level of growth moving forward in the next plan. It might be that we end up with slightly more, slightly less. Like I said, that's what next year now will be important, to try and get as much, get as many different opinions, I suppose, to sort of feed into the work to see what we should actually be looking to, or how we should actually be looking to develop the borough over the next 15 years.
Okay. I jumped down to page 20, Chair, and I apologize if one or two people have heard this view from me and a little short rant, but on page 20, the second paragraph down, it refers there to the release of the 2021 census data. And it says the data shown that, contrary to the existing mid-year population estimates, indication population growth over the last 10 years, the census data shows that the population has remained stable. The mid-year estimates indicated the population grew from 58,802 2011 to 60,424 in 2020. However, the census data shows the population of County Borough in 2021 was 58,800. I think that and I know it's very complicated how various members of staff, including yourselves as planners and elsewhere, come to these mid-year figures. But I don't believe for 1 second that the population of the County Borough of Merthyr Tydfil has dropped by 1,200. And I'll tell you why. As a political animal, I've been out, as other members, elected members have, knocking the doors with a registered elector in your hand. And you look at the registered electors, nobody registered, no one registered, no one registered. When you knock the door, 9 times out of 10, there is somebody living in that property. Years ago, the census staff, I know this, I know it happened. Every time the census went back and forth more than once, several times, knocking the doors to get the census form back. That doesn't usually happen anymore. And in my opinion, that was a contributory factor to, because I think it came as a surprise to everybody. But that figure, but it's very important because they base that figure on everything as to how much money we're going to get from the Welsh government, for example. So unless somebody goes into this with a fine-tooth comb to find out, in my opinion, what exactly is the population, that figure, in my humble opinion, is not right.
See, I agree with Councillor Jones on that one. The figure doesn't make any sort of sense when you look at things logically. So the figures are not, the council don't have any input into the mid-year estimates. They are calculated by Welsh Government. Stats Wales sort of are responsible for those, and it's primarily the estimates are based on sort of births and deaths data from registrars, new registrations of GP surgeries, those sort of things, and then there are assumptions made in terms of migration in and out of the borough from within the UK and internationally. The census is then theoretically every 10 years where you get the sort of more robust data, and the mid-year estimates from the 10 years in between get readjusted to reflect that. However, that readjustment hasn't been done yet, and I suggest that part of that is probably because they're still trying to work out what the figures actually are from 2021, because again, obviously you've had, like you said, you've got the issue of the pandemic was on at the time when the census was being taken, and you didn't have the visitors knocking and checking up to get people to respond. And yeah, from a common sense point of view, I can't see any scenario where we would have essentially lost 1,500 people within a single year.
No.
I said if the revised mid-year estimates are published, and then there's a change in the trend over the last 10 years that could explain that, then we might be able to sort of explain it and see what was happening. But yeah, in terms of that sort of sudden bump from 2020 2021, it doesn't make, and that's one of the things, because the population is one of the starting points for preparing the strategy for an LDP. So we need at least those mid-year estimates to be produced, and hopefully with a bit of rationale behind whatever the new data shows.
But we're stuck, are we not, with a figure which is undoubtedly incorrect
at the moment? Yeah, I'd agree that figure doesn't represent what the population is.
Okay, I'm on to page 18 now, Chair. Bottom of the page, it's under the Planning Policy Wales, edition 11 February 2021. Refer to the changes there in this policy, and the first dot is a reduction of the threshold for Welsh ministers to call in sites. Now, we've had a pre-meeting, and I think perhaps you could look at that statement two ways. I've looked at it the one way. Other members have given a different view of it. What exactly does that mean? Does it mean the threshold has been higher or lowered for the ability for Welsh Government Minister to call in?
It's been lowered. Historically, if the council was assessing a plan application that wasn't in accordance with the development plan and procedure then recorded by Welsh Government, there was a threshold for residential sites of they had to be at least 6 hectares or 150 dwellings in size for Welsh Government to call it in. For example, if it was being proposed outside the settlement boundary, it had to be at least 150 dwellings or 6 hectares for it to be called in by Welsh Government, or for them to consider calling it in. That threshold was lowered a couple of years ago to be in line with the major development threshold of half a hectare or 10 dwellings.
Right.
So it has. So Welsh Government can now theoretically call in more applications. But we tend not to get that many applications being called in anyway.
Right. Good. Well, that's the way I read it, that it would certainly been lowered. And just in that block, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth one down, it refers to the alteration to the use of compulsory purchase powers. Can you expand a bit more on that?
Yeah, there was just an amendment made, again, sort of around about the same time. I think it was part of some number of measures they were looking to make recovery after the pandemic easier. I think there was a sort of added criteria to one of the scenarios where a local authority can CPO in terms of where it would allow the development, redevelopment or improvement of land and buildings where there's a compelling case in the public interest. They just added that criteria to sort of give a bit more flexibility to councils to be able to use CPOs where needed.
Right. Does that include, for you, Chair, we got various, well, a lot of historic buildings throughout the country, borough, and unfortunately, I think most of them are privately owned. We know the state of some of them. Does that make it a bit easier to deal with that? If we and I could give an example, but perhaps I perhaps I would, yeah.
It makes it, I suppose it makes it a little bit easier in terms of there's an additional criteria that is fairly broad that could encapsulate the CPO of buildings like that. However, in terms of the actual process itself, once you actually get down to what you have to do to CPO it, there hasn't been any change in that. It's still a fairly onerous process that needs to be followed.
Right. Okay. And one last one. It's on page 23. It's under the heading analysis. Last sentence there. And it says, as a result of these events, the 5-year land supply policy in Wales was removed and replaced by a new method of monitoring housing delivery based on trajectories set out in local development plans. Because I think under the previous plan, you had to have X percentage of land, but I don't think we probably we weren't the only authority being able to achieve that. So, what sort of trajectories are you using to determine that now?
The trajectories can be seen in the AMR itself. The page of the AMR report is 26. I don't know if that tallies up with the sort of overall committee report. No, it's this with the dams. So there's a graph on this.
Page 36 of the
Right,
actual report.
Right, there we are. It's a big document to remember and refer back. Is right. So there's an explanation there, is it?
Yeah, effectively, like the old system was based on councils would need to demonstrate that they have an adequate supply of housing covering the next 5 years. So if our target in the plan was 100 dwellings a year, we had to demonstrate with certainty that there were 500 dwellings coming forward over the next 5 years. It's changed slightly now, whereas we effectively look at a site-by-site basis over each of the 15 years of the plan and sort of work out how many dwellings we think are going to come forward per year, and that translates then into the bar graphs that you can see where we have a sort of a curved trajectory of some lower when the plan was adopted, some lower years before adoption, and then theoretically once you allocate a lot of new land to come forward for housing, that then starts to come forward and housing completions will then rise. Right. And then there's an update then on the next page to show what the actual situation has been.
Right. Okay, thank you for your patience, Jay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bill Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about the voice, bit of a cough. What we need to do next, that's the number one and four. What input do this committee have to change this agenda? Do we got the agenda to take it forward? But we're looking at the agenda and we're back and forth. So we want something that we can take it without rushing about and going from A to D and D all over the place. That's most of the committee reports in this council at the moment. So can we work with the officers to take it forward to improve it? Because that's if we're in a review, we've got to improve a lot of things. So can we improve it in such a way that we all know what we're talking about, not going from A to B?
Yeah, I think one of the issues that we have is that you can't make changes to the plan once it's adopted. There's limited scope to make changes to the plan once you've produced your draft version of the plan, which will happen probably 2 to 2.5 years into the process. An issue we had last time around was at the time in between the sort of preferred strategy stage and then the full draft version of the plan, there were elections, so we had a change in administration. So because of the tight timescales, then it's a rush to get the new councillors up to date and stuff. So things can get lost a little bit there. I think one thing that is beneficial this time around is the preparation will sort of go through a councillor's term. So we'll be able to have consistency in terms of councillors and the same councillors being involved right the way throughout the process, which will, even though work won't formally start the new plan until the end of 2024, early 2025, engagement with councillors and scrutiny committee, again subject exactly how we do it, will commence sort of early next year.
Yeah, can I say I don't want to change the plan. I want to change the format of the report to improve it. That's what I'm looking at. Thanks for that. And the other one is the target not being met to improving the priority open spaces, because we've got many big estates. I can see the Goodness site, and we're not hitting the target. And in the Goodness, I'll be careful to say there. We've got 2 playing fields from the schools, and so there's no community playing field there. So no, again, you've got to go to some of the biggest ex-council estate, but it's hardly anything there, isn't it? So how do we improve that if we haven't got the land for housing?
Again, that's all sort of goes back to that balance in terms of what the overall strategy and level of growth proposed for the plan is. But just to point out, well, in relation to that specific indicator, we haven't hit the target on open spaces being improved through funding gained through the planning system. That doesn't necessarily mean that there hasn't been improvements to those priority open spaces. It's just that they haven't been funded through SIL or Section 106 monies that we've got in through the planning system. Again, that then also links back to the fact that there haven't been that many houses built over the last 3 or 4 years, so we haven't had the funds coming in. However, there is, over the last 6 months, they've been with things like the Persimmon site being granted, the site in Trevechan being developed now. There is money starting to come in to that pot that we can then use to go towards improving the open spaces as well.
So the plan is to use what we get from other companies to improve the playing facilities, everything else.
That's what we can, part of what we can use the SIL money for. Yeah, there's a list of infrastructure projects on the SIL list that the money can go towards. Open space provision is one of those. There's things like the drainage network, highways improvements is on there. But again, a lot of it will depend on how much we get in the pot, into the pot from developments coming forward as well. Great.
And then my last question is working with the state's regeneration, delivering the development of the town centre, and where are we with that? Because a lot of people in the last couple of months have been asking the question, why are it taking so long for us to go from here to there? So can somebody give me an answer on that? Because it is a big issue.
Yeah.
And you go down there now and it's a nice so. Yeah. The shop's empty, but the old bus station is a mess. So where are we in that, please?
Well, in terms of the old bus station, I believe the funding has been secured from Welsh Government last week, and I think the contract has been awarded last week. So work should be commencing shortly on the Cleveland site. In terms of the wider redevelopment of the shopping centre and the remainder of the town centre, one of the issues that's been causing a delay sort of over the last year or so is the flood risk within the town centre. We've had to commission quite a lot of modelling work to demonstrate exactly what the flood risk is in the town centre and how we then look to deal with that over as part of the redevelopment of the shopping centre, as most of the town centre is within higher risk flood zone, and we need to address that before we put things such as retail or residential in there, which are classed as vulnerable development. And at the moment, aren't permitted to do that through planning policy.
So we've got the funding now for the old bus station. We've got a shop in the precinct, and we for the community use. Can we put the plans up there and inform the public what's happening? Because nobody seems to know what's happening, and even some of the councillors aren't really sure what's happening, because now it's all coming out. So
yeah, I think in terms of the work on the old bus station site, those plans are as were approved by planning several months ago, and have gone through that scrutiny.
Yeah, but the public won't have seen the plans. So
they were part in the consultation shop before the plan application came in. I don't appreciate it's been a little while since they were in there, and again, I suppose if we've got the unit, something we could look at, I suppose, in terms of putting those plans back and up.
Well, we've got to use the swap money to get the planning information out for the county borough. No.
It would be Regen's sort of responsibility to sort of run that, but something they could look at. Yeah.
Well, we should work together, shouldn't we? Yeah. Okay, thank you much.
Philip Starr, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Craig, it relates to the section 5.3 again, second bullet point down, which says targets not being met in relation to the delivery of allocated employment land, a number of jobs delivered. And if you look at page 30 in the report, it actually says there's not been any development on allocated employment sites over this monitoring period of the replacement LDP. And the simple question is why?
The employment sites are a little bit different to housing in terms of, again, appreciating we haven't delivered as much housing as we need to. There tends to be a steadier stream of housing developments coming forward. The employment development market is just a lot more speculative by nature, and we have had some new employment uses delivered on sort of within some of our existing industrial estates and other areas, but we haven't in terms of the actual allocated sites. I think we've got 4 allocated employment sites. One is part of the Fossefran land rec scheme.
Okay,
One is just over the road then on Court Mill Road, the sort of large plateau there.
that's
Then-
where that school might have been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then we've got the car park, or the Hoover car park, the sort of other side of the road where they've got the
Okay.
pylon in, and then land south of Merthyr Industrial Estate in Troydrew, between Bent Park and Troydrew. That land is currently being used as a depot by TFW as part of the Metro work, so that one will become available again at some point in the future. And there are now there's been active marketing on the Court Mill Road site, and there are interested parties in discussions with the council at the moment. And I think it's the intention to produce a master plan to sort of bring that Court Mill Road site forward in accordance with the LDP next year.
Okay, so that's ongoing then.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. It just didn't chime with me the fact that in the report itself, when it says what do we need to do next, 7.3 related entirely to housing, and there was nothing in the what do we need to do next in relation to the allocated employment sites, which I thought might have been deliberate or whether it was an oversight, but we certainly needed to discuss what the allocated employment sites were and why there hadn't been any development. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair.
Caught me cold then, Phil. I thought you had a couple more. There were 1 or 2 others raised in the pre-meeting, Craig. 5.3, page 7, a target not being met in relation to the improvement of priority open spaces using funding. Oh, we've gone through that, sorry. And page 24 was at the bottom of the page is an action, and apparently it's in red. That says something like policy review required, further investigation and research may be required before a decision to formally review is confirmed. Is there an explanation for that, please?
Yeah, that's part of the scoring system, the sort of traffic light scoring system that's in place on the monitoring report. And obviously there are a couple more sort of darker reds in the report this year. And as that one relates specifically to the policy that allocates the housing requirement, it is suggesting that policy itself needs to be reviewed. So if we weren't at the point in time where we were required to start the review of the plan in a couple of months, it might well be the case that the AMR would have recommended a review anyway, given how far behind we are in terms of delivering sort of housing employment as well.
Thank you very much for that. Are there, Clive?
Yes. On page 19, under the heading Regional Contextual Issues, Strategic Development Plan, the middle sentence there refers to the fact, and I quote, regulations were put in place in April 2021 that will enable a South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee to exercise the strategic development planning function. So that's 2.5 years ago. I can remember, you know, I think this came to council being set up, but I don't seem to have heard anything more about it since. So can you give me an example of where they would be involved at a strategic level?
They will be responsible for preparing what is effectively an LDP, but for the region.
So that's South East Wales, is it?
It will cover South East Wales, yeah, the 10 authorities and the parts of the national parks that lie within those authorities.
Right. So how does that tie in to the local development plan? Are there certain, is there only certain things that they look at, or do they look at the whole picture?
It'll be more strategic. It won't go into as much specifics and as much details as the local development plans do, but it will look to allocate sites for things such as housing, employment uses, but they will need to be of a strategic nature for the region. I said, although work hasn't formally started on yet, so we don't necessarily know what the thresholds will be, it's unlikely that we will have certainly housing sites allocated. I think sort of initial discussions have been you're looking at a site of over 1,000 dwellings, probably that would need to be allocated.
Right.
What the SDP will do is look at the overall level of growth for the region, and in terms of housing and employment and other growth for the region, and sort of determine in conjunction with the authorities, because we'll be working with the CJC CCR team on it. That will be where the level of growth will be set for the individual authorities.
So revisiting some question I asked earlier, if the population estimates of the other 9 authorities, some of which have all gone haywire, is that something that they can get involved with, or is that outside their responsibilities?
They will be getting involved with it, because as again as in the local development plans, the sort of the baseline population data is your starting point for preparing your development plan. The CCR, or the Cardiff Capital Region, CJC, I think is just sort of formalising itself in terms of a body and having employees and people to work on the different projects, because it's not just an LDP, there's a regional transport plan that they'll be responsible for producing as well. Yeah. But in advance of that, and the 10 individual authorities are hoping that this piece of work will feed into the SDP, is we are looking to commission a piece of work that will look at the regional population growth and sort of find out exactly, because there's a number of issues that have been raised as part of other authorities' revised local development plans. I think one of the key things is as well is where we've all sort of carried on and formulated our own strategies, and we're saying, all right, for example, in Merthyr, we're saying we are going to be we're going to attract people in from Caerphilly, from RCT.
Yeah.
But Caerphilly and RCT might be saying the same, or saying they're attracting people from Merthyr into their plan. So this piece of regional work will sort of iron out all those issues, and so that will then hopefully feed into the strategic development plan for the region and sort of clarify those things at a regional level.
Yeah. So when they finish that work, that's something reported to each of the respective 10 local authorities. Is that the way it works?
We can report it back. It could be something that comes back through Scrutiny committee next year, as part of some of the sessions that look at reviewing the plan itself. But what will happen is that will be then one of the key pieces of evidence in terms of the next plan that we prepare.
Okay.
Can I come in? But I think there's a feeling among some of the authorities that it's taking the onus from local authorities and giving it to regional, so that we don't get the input that we should be having. So I feel that way myself. And as a small authority, I think that we have to be careful that we're not left behind, because the big authorities will look after themselves before looking at us.
Yeah, just to sort of add to that, there's been, when we were sort of first started work on the SDP, or sort of looking at how it would be prepared between the 10 authorities, probably 4-5 years ago, maybe a little bit more. One of the sort of the issues was the voting system in terms of getting everything through. And I think we'd gotten to one point where there was a system that was based on a sort of a formula where it was based on your geographical area and the population of the borough. I think we ended up then having one vote, and Cardiff might have had 4 or 5 votes, and the authorities in between. What should make it a little bit easier in terms of our position as a small authority now is it will be one authority, one vote.
Right.
And in order, those arrangements can be changed in terms of sort of change, but the change has got to be agreed unanimously, so that it cannot be changed unless all 10 authorities agree to the changes as well.
Very good. I'm glad I asked the question. Okay.
Finished, Clive? Mr. Pipstar?
Yeah, coming back to what some might consider the crux with regard to the report and its future reviews, page 73. There's what I consider to be quite an important paragraph there, whereby you identify in the report the external factors that have had an impact on the delivery of the strategy, and 3 bullet points there on page 73: rise in interest rates, inflationary pressure causing problems for contractors, and increase in development costs as well. Now, given the fact that those are likely to persist over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, who knows? I'm not the Bank of England or anything, but any indication of whether those will improve, or are we still going to be facing the similar situation to what we faced in this report at the next review, given that the funding pressures on this authority are again going to be ongoing? Are we going to be in a similar position, given the fact that the economic climate, the external economic climate, is going to have another bearing on how this report is delivered, or how this plan is delivered? It's an observation. Nothing we can do about that as individuals, but I think they are key areas which need to be borne in mind when any plan or any review of any plan is put into place.
Yeah, it's obviously going to be very difficult to sort of predict those things over any sort of period of time, really. But again, I think what it boils down to from the LDP's point of view is getting as much engagement as we can up front, to try and to sort of determine right at the start, what do we think a realistic strategy level of growth is for the plan.
I think that's the point. Is realistic, isn't it? Do
the key
you
bit.
lower your sights? Do you lower your targets? Do you come up with a more realistic projection rather than the best fit?
That's one of the tricky things, because there's Welsh Government have always wanted the LDPs to be realistic but ambitious,
Right.
and ambitious but deliverable. So again, it's getting that balance right. And I said ultimately, what a lot of it will depend on is the baseline population figures.
Yeah.
Because if our projections, because the sort of national level projections show the baseline, right? If there isn't a policy intervention of any kind in this place, this is what will happen to the population in that area. If in that scenario your population is declining, then you probably have to build a smaller number of houses to address that decline.
Mm-hmm.
If you're already growing in that baseline scenario and there's pressure to grow further, that's when you've got to build a sort of higher level of housing, and that's where you can get into the sort of difficulties that we've had in terms of achieving a level of growth.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Clive Jones again.
Sorry, following that, this sometimes happens in Scrutiny Committee. Somebody asks a question, so I need to further clarify. In the case of sites where the contractors have gone bust, and a few years later, the development costs have gone up, the cost of materials have gone through the roof. Does this mean that the actual plans may have to be revisited, because the costs that were a few years ago have changed completely and they're up there?
Yeah, that is something that could happen. It hasn't happened, I think, on any of the sites, on the 3 or 4 sites that we've had. But that's not over the last couple of years.
But it could happen.
But it could, yeah. And some of the other things that can tend to happen when that's not the case is that developers come back in and look for a lower proportion of affordable housing or the plan obligations to make the scheme more viable from their side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that hasn't been the case, I think, on any of our sites yet.
Right. Okay. So at every vacant site now where there's contracts gone bust, you mentioned earlier on, there are discussions taking place between the housing associations.
They're all back on site. They've all appointed.
Including St Tidwell's.
St Tidwell's thing, I don't think I actually got that far with that one, but I think it's East Street, Landerprinter Road, and there's one other. I can't remember which it was, but they
actually mentioned it in the report.
They're all back on site now, and we'll deliver units over the next year.
I mentioned St Tidwell's because I think it was about 170.
No, it was like 60 or 70, I think.
Was it less than that?
Yeah, it was a little bit less, but
you know, a reasonable size site in the centre of town virtually.
Yeah.
But okay, thanks.
One very simple one left for me then. Can a piece of land be allocated more than one category?
we can allocate sites for mixed use development. That tends to happen less now than it has done historically, just because of the emphasis on the council having to evidence what you're putting forward on that site. We'd have to, like, say we had a site coming forward where we were going to have a school and housing delivered as part. If we got to the point where we had certainty that the school was going to come forward and be delivered on that site and then housing, we could allocate that as a mixed use development. The other approach is to take a little bit more of a speculative approach, such as what we've done with the Ivorworks site in Dowlas in this plan, in that we've allocated it for residential-led mixed-use development. But because of the uncertainty as to how that site is actually going to come forward, we couldn't specify a number of dwellings and then count that towards our target. I said, work is ongoing in the background and things do seem to be progressing a little bit with that site now, but because we didn't have the certainty that we could develop on that site, we couldn't factor it in towards our target.
Fair enough, yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes.
It was just following on what you just said about the Iger site, because I was thinking about this after when I was reading the report and you just said it about it being mixed. Would that be used then maybe as an example of what it could be going forward?
In terms of using our approach on other sites?
Yeah.
Yes, certainly. I think, like I said, the key thing that, from our point of view, in terms of what we're actually allocating, putting that sort of physical blob on a map, is we've got to have a degree of certainty that what we are saying is going to be delivered on that site will come forward. We've got to evidence that as part of the public inquiry.
So I was at the site visit for that, and I was on the understanding that was happening.
Well, yeah, I would.
I believe, wasn't it the school as well as actually going there?
With the work that's gone on since we adopted the plan, I would hope that in the new plan we'll be able to allocate it more specifically to reflect what's going to come forward on there.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Are there any further? Sorry, yes, certainly, David.
I think, as you alluded to earlier, Clive, and I believe this time in the LDP we've got education involved, because in fairness they didn't come to the table last time and it caused a lot of problems, but they are involved now and they've been encouraged to get involved. So thank you for you.
Are there any final questions? Let these gentlemen go then. Thank you very much for attending and the information.
Good.
Sorry? No comments. Not even comments today. Apologies, yes, of course, comments. Yes, Clive?
It's just a general one, really. I think this particular review is extremely important because we've got a totally different set of issues that have affected this. Would have thought, 10 years ago, that COVID would have dramatically affected everything and every decision that we make as a local authority. Inflation has been at one of the highest levels for many years. The cost of living has gone through the roof, started to come down a bit. Inflation gone through the roof. That hopefully seems to be on the way down. So it's an unusual set of circumstances that I can ever remember when we come to reviewing a local development plan. So I think it's even more important now that once all your staff have done the work, that we look at it in particular detail as to what comes out of the work that you staff and perhaps others are doing until that time.
In that case, I reiterate my earlier statement. Thank you very much both for attending. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
move on into item 4, the forward work programme 2023-24. Any comments with regard to the forward work programme?
The next 3 scheduled meetings, there's not a lot on the agendas. There might be big items. Litter bins is next. Electric vehicles, fleet management, biodiversity, all of which I think we've had before. There are some additional items for consideration at the end of the forward work programme, some of which are duplication, like litter bins is in there as well. But I still would like to know what's happening with the absorbent hygiene products situation. You know, we've pushed that several times in this committee and we've never had an answer.
I
Oh.
just say as well, reading through with the clean and green. No, and as you said, we've had this conversation as well many times about taking action and enforcing action against, you know, the dumping. Or I know like a lot of this is under regen, but it's still an ongoing issue, and it seems to creep its way back into us as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that it really, really means it's part of, you know, the well-being. I don't.
Apparently there is some action on that coming back to this directorate. How far it's been extended, I don't know,
Thanks.
and what the full context is. But that is what I'm led to believe.
On that particular one, you are right. I think this is going back perhaps a year longer. Certainly in the last 18 months, there was this strong rumour that meetings are going to take place, I think, initially at Offside, They may well have done, but we certainly weren't told, certainly as elected members, what had happened. And then when I made inquiries, don't know, and I sent an email, I think, direct to the chief officer, Judith, and it was a definite no. It was not coming back. And that was within the last 6 weeks. So we really need to clarify, because Councillor Leighton, Paula Leighton is right. As members, it's a bit of a mishmash. There seems to be two directly involved with this. The fly tipping has been a major issue for a long time, and we need to get to grips with it. And I personally don't think that's really happening at an officer level. It needs to be resolved. I mean, currently, fly tipping is with environmental health. I'll say no more, because quite frankly, it's not working as it should. And when we had it within neighbourhood services, things weren't perfect by a long chalk. But there was a difference in trying to progress matters there. But so that is an issue I think that we need to perhaps have further discussions. But you're right, Phil, that we perhaps need to clarify exactly, because I think our next meeting is on the 18th of December.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I've jumbled up my papers here.
The only thing on the agenda is litter bins within the county borough. Yeah,
We got a workshop on that, I think, due this Friday.
Yeah.
Friday.
I got to give my apologies because something else has cropped up and I can't make it there.
I have sent to Neil to say I would.
I
So-
agree with you with it doesn't make any sense to me at all to have one aspect of litter and fly tipping in one department.
No.
And the enforcement, in inverted commas, of it in another department. It needs to be together in the same one.
The bracketed, yeah, aren't they?
And I think it's causing more issues than anything, because we don't know what they're doing. We don't know what's happening for us. Nothing's getting done. I mean, private land, we got to make a move somewhere along the line. I don't know if it's under us, environmental health. I just don't know which one. We do need to bring it back.
It's called divide and rule. It's called divide and fail now.
Yeah.
It is, and like
We
Chair said, it needs to be under the one umbrella so it can be dealt with. We can go forward with certain moves or certain areas we want to cover.
As an example, Chair, I've tried it always. There are certain powers in planning that where they've given permission to build, and as has happened to several sites, we heard the explanation for some of it this afternoon, doesn't happen and becomes a tipping site. Because and once one pile of litters on private land, people think, oh, I can do that and get away with it. And before you know it, there's a problem. But we are not getting to grips with it. And you cannot, under any circumstance, try and explain to a member of the public, if we get an area of land next door to it cleaned up, and right the other side of that fence is private land with a pile of litter, they'd say, well, you're the local authority. Why can't it be dealt with? I'm trying to explain to them after 10 minutes, their eyes roll over, so they don't understand why we can't deal with it. It's an issue which is ongoing, and the officers know about it, and it's come to a dead halt.
And I can only agree with you. I do want to comment on one thing you said about that the enforcement team wasn't perfect. I'll agree with you, it wasn't perfect, but it had little over 12, 15 months, 15, 18 months perhaps to bed in and get everything working. And but it was one of the best performing enforcement teams in Wales.
Yes, was it?
And
yeah, I tend to agree with it.
I don't know where we're going.
So Chair, stick with this one now on the issues about who's doing what. Are you going to have further discussions at a senior level with all those involved as to where we are with it?
We can certainly speak to the senior officers, but I just wonder if it's worth speaking to the cabinet member as well.
Oh, yeah, I agree with
Yeah, good idea.
you know,
Or the two
any-
cabinet members.
Yes,
Let's say,
any-
you know, this isn't working as it is. It needs to be under one umbrella. Can you guys get your heads together and come back to us as soon as possible with how you see it going forward?
There's no overlap of membership between this committee and that committee then?
well, I'm on both.
Oh,
And it's from a scrutiny view, it's a bit of a nightmare because, you know, the one committee's looking at one aspect of it, the other committee's looking at the other aspect. It's not working.
We're all here to discuss and come up with a resolution. It's not happening.
So, sorry,
Is it-
you mentioned the other two issues, and this was one of them. What was the other two, Craig?
on the agenda
Yeah,
for the next 2 months, the one after December, which I presume is January, is fleet management and electric vehicles. And then in March, then biodiversity and green space management. They're areas that we've been over before as well. But there are a number of additional items for consideration, including that absorbent hygiene, recycling, street lighting, traffic management, plastics, playgrounds, all of which I think we've touched on at some time in the last cycle. A lot of them are just update reports after previous scrutiny discussions. I certainly would like to know an update on absorbent hygiene products because we've been over that and that seems to have disappeared a little bit. I suppose waste recycling equipment has been no indication, but there was a suggestion they were going to move to a longer period of collection, wasn't it? At some time.
Yeah.
Which we decided was not a good idea.
No.
But you've heard nothing more with regard to that.
That's not going to happen, I hope.
Good.
Maybe just as an idea, we can arrange a further planning session outside the scrutiny, and you can try and get sort of directors to come and develop a forward work programme further from there and additional items. If that's agreement.
Are we talking with other scrutiny?
No, just
us?
a meeting.
You would have a pre-scrutiny committee in December, and you.
Do it in a pre-scrutiny.
Oh, yeah, could do, yeah. Expand it to an hour and
Expand it to an hour.
Yeah.
And allocate at least half of it for.
Updating a forward work
Yeah,
programme.
We'll have a look and see what, out of the list of items, what, if anything, is ready to come back, that we can got enough information on it to scrutinise it properly.
On the one Phil's quite rightly brought up again about the whole issue, because we brought this to scrutiny committee on at least 2 occasions, maybe more, about the hygiene stuff. That's
Hygiene product.
Yeah, that's still going into the black bins. I mean, I get the impression that the officers don't really want to progress this robustly to the nth degree. They've given us excuses in the past as to why they think we couldn't do it at this moment in time. But my view is, I think there's about 8 or 9 authorities or 22, at least, have gone down this route and are doing it. So surely we can find out what the experiences are of all these authorities and the cost, etc. I think that the one drawback that they were trying to say is there was no wherever they take in the other authority, there isn't one fairly close by, because I think we'd have to go to, I don't know, beyond Llanelli or somewhere, quite a distance away. But there's no reason why that isn't a matter that couldn't be progressed further up the line. In Southeast Wales, for example, we meet together with these other 9 authorities about all sorts of issues. And, there are other authorities either side of us in the same boat, because I don't think RCT are involved with this, are they? Second largest authority in Wales.
They did have a AHP system over there. So I remember Andrew Morgan having disagreement with Welsh Government when they reduced the percentage allowed in recycling absorbent hygiene products.
Right.
Whether they're doing it now, I don't know.
Bin collections are on strike. Still are for some products. They're collecting the recycling now, not general waste. The nappy absorbent hygiene collection was always done. That did not come under the auspices, presumably, of the bin collection in Cardiff, which leads me to think it was done privately on behalf of the council, because whoever was collecting that particular product wasn't subject to the industrial dispute. They were always collected. The green, the recycling not, the general waste not, but the nappies were definitely collected, because they are collected
So
separately.
we've got Cardiff, the largest authority in Wales, who are still doing this, whether it's, they've adopted a private authority and it's...
I'm not sure, but they were collected.
You're probably right.
They were collected.
Because I would think that the strike might have been over earlier if there was this absorbent material was hanging around.
Yeah.
Because, my God, would that cause a stink?
Yeah, but I got a grandson in Cardiff who's selling nappies and he's collected.
Right. So, can we make inquiries with Cardiff?
Yeah, I just asked Neil now to look into what's happening in adjacent authorities and perhaps through the whole of the South East Wales region.
Yeah. And perhaps when we make our own inquiries, we can put in writing to the officers what's the up-to-date position from them, because when we come to the meeting, if they're saying the same excuses, and I think they are in some respect the excuses, we should hold them to account, frankly.
We should persist, shouldn't we? We should ask the question through your phone.
It's clearly in this day and age, we're doing everything to stop people putting food waste in, and 50% of the last figure of the public in Merthyr was still putting food waste in the black bins. That should be stamped upon, and others were still putting recyclables in there. So if we are pursuing those 2 aspects, I see no reason why, in the not too distant future, no absorbent products should be going in that black bin. It should be negligible, the stuff that people are putting in there.
And yet they are. Everyone does it.
They are. I mean, we've got an uphill struggle. We're trying to stop, and they know who they are, because all you got to see is the bin lifted and go through it. I wouldn't want the job of emptying it, but it has been done. They go through it and they tell them, well, that shouldn't be in there. That shouldn't be in there. Why are you doing it? Because people are too lazy. Anyway.
But with the nappy situation, there is no alternative, is there? You do have to put it in your general waste.
Exactly.
Because there's no alternative, there's no facility for you to put it anywhere else.
Yeah. All we do is provide them with a larger bin, but then they have to comply with various things to be able to have those bins.
Mhm.
So are we happy with that for the time being?
Next pre-scrutiny meeting will be, you're allocating a bit of a longer time, is it?
An extra half an hour to look at what, if anything, can be added to our work program.
Right.
That's the Thursday before.
Yeah,
We've already had the invites, haven't we? So
Yeah,
you'd have to
already.
just update them.
Already had the invites. Do you want me to ask her directly, see if she can attend for 10, 15 minutes? Just
Yeah.
to add on?
yeah, and we'll raise the concerns that possibly I may have a conversation with her outside as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have a quarterly technical meeting before Christmas as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what date that is.
Yeah, I can't remember what date it is, but I may
Yeah.
bring some items as well.
So,
Yeah.
so Chair, as it stands at the moment, we got one item scheduled for December. Is that right? And that's the litter bins.
I don't think we're going to get anything in time for that. Then
Right.
just unless we get one of the ones we've asked for an update on. I think it'll be. It's too early for recycling figures. Still.
And one is progress report for traffic management. And then there's another one then about wrap plastics. Oh, that was the later meeting. There were two from May, street lighting and traffic management. It just says a progress report relating to the alloy system, which I wouldn't have thought is going to take a lot of time.
No, that's
It's
just
underway.
Yeah, the new light they put in one of the alleyways in New Getting is absolutely superb. They replaced an old-fashioned light which went out. They had a look at it. They said there's no point doing this. They put a new one in, which is operated by motion, and it's absolutely superb.
All right.
It's light sensitive and motion sensitive. It's great, really good.
Is that on the high street?
No, it's on it's on the lane between where I live and
Yeah.
and it's a dark lane. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
they do need a light there, but the
Oh,
old
good.
one went, and the new one that they put in,
Is it nice and
Um,
bright?
it's lovely and bright. Yeah, but only for the time that it takes you to walk
Yeah.
past it.
Yeah. That's good. Well, if you, Chair, if you find that there's one of these, there's an update report which can be given, and it's not going to take half the evening, put it on there.
yeah.
We leave
I'm
it.
just looking at it now, and I can't see anything. We've spoken about playgrounds. The only thing that's happened by there is the program has been pushed backwards, where they were hoping to start them late summer, but it now looks as if one or two have been started in November earlier this month,
Right.
and they're looking to start any time up to early January with some of them.
Right.
We had a date for January the 8th for
Yeah.
the Glencline and a few others. I think Rebecca, maybe around the same time.
I can't remember them all. All 10 projects are going ahead, but they've been put back from their original dates.
Probably because of the weather, I would have thought is a big issue there.
I think there was an issue around procuring all the equipment and allocating the contracts to each of the different providers, and then getting the equipment. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, fair enough.
So there's nothing really that you can extra do to that.
Okay.
If you will bear with me, then Neil and I will have a sit down and a chat to Judith and see what we can come up with, and even pull something out of the air. Because I agree with you, the agendas are light, but we were expecting other things to come in that just haven't.
The one you already notified us. Was it
Sorry, Councillor.
for the pre-scrutiny?
It'd be 4 o'clock, the pre-meet.
Right. So don't change it earlier because I personally could have a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Quarter
till 5.
If you
Yeah.
pulled it to 3:30, I'd
Yeah.
be running round
Yeah, no, I do it
with the school run. Right, okay.
Right.
Is there an opportunity to discuss the potential moving of fly tipping back to this committee, or would that have to be done at the end of the next cycle?
Let's see what the comments are, the initial comments with
Regen, got it?
Regen, yeah.
Okay,
And we'll update you once that meeting's happened, and we'll basically play it by ear.
Yeah,
And
okay.
If we can bring something in quicker, we will. But largely depend on them as well.
Right. Okay.
It's Lean.
Yeah, we do this.
Move on into item 5, scrutiny work program. Have we got the right issues the right way at the right time and place? We just covered most of that. Scrutiny referrals, I have none. And report recommendations. Did we address the recommendations in each report? And do we believe we've added value? I believe we have, in that we've said that we want to be involved with the development of the review. And I think that is the right thing to do. And I believe this committee can add a lot of value to it, because the documents previously have been very dry and very onerous reading. You know, it's a massive document pushing on 900 pages, and anything we can do to make it a bit more interesting and less onerous, I think can only be a benefit. So agreed with that. I did say in my spiel that I would, subject to committee agreement, be encouraging all elected members and committee co-optees to thoroughly scrutinise the reviews for the awards and the implications. We now know that that's a bit further up the line, but certainly still to encourage people to keep an eye on the review, LDP review. So if that's all right with everyone, we'll hold it back at the moment, but at the appropriate time, we'll let that go forward, let that go out.
But
Oh.
they were obviously asked and didn't get involved. And clearly, that's one of the reasons why we ended up with the new school on the Bishop Evely site. Frankly, I think we all accepted that it should never have gone there. And if they had responded, we well have been in a different position. No, the fact that, you know, some of us felt that it should have been on the other site wasn't argued about this afternoon.
No, but I did inquire about it when we were talking about it
Yeah.
first, when the issues around the greenie came about.
Yeah.
And I was told that because it wasn't allocated for that use as a school site, that it couldn't be used. And you heard Craig saying there that it's difficult to get the allocation, the designation changed mid-year. And the time you get it changed, we'd run out of time for the project.
Yeah.
So
There we are.
the right reason for us to get involved earlier. Feedback on scrutiny activities. Again, we've gone through outstanding actions, what's outstanding, and additional items for consideration. Any final comments from members? Queries? In that case, there's no other business that I have. In that case, thank you very much, everyone, for attending and your input. Very much appreciated. And we shall see you all soon. Meeting is closed.
Thank you.
Ah.
One more person.
Because I will steal it.